Azure services, who know what is cloud computing, who know how Microsoft Azure, what all kind of services it does offer, and everything. Okay, because we are here discussing a very specific thing, a very specific domain, a specialist domain, basically, infrastructure security services. So when we talk about cloud, okay, on cloud, we have infrastructure services, platform services, and then software as a service, SaaS services as well. And when it comes to security, okay, not just security, but overall, when you use cloud actually have introduced a shared responsibility model where for whatever resources or workload you have deployed, infrastructure you are managing, some of the responsibility, some part, some aspect of, you can say security, management, administration, you have to take care of it. Some of the security and basic infrastructure will be provided by cloud vendor, that is. So some of the security services which are now available on Azure for infrastructure that we'll discuss here. So services that we'll discuss here in this session, we will discuss DDoS. DDoS is a denial of service, uh, protection for denial of service. And we will discuss also other services like firewall. And we will also discuss services like Key Vault, how you can safeguard your secrets and so on. Fine. So very first thing, Azure DDoS protection, denial of service, DDoS. In Azure, DDoS protection is DDoS protection is a service that allows you to eliminate denial of service attack, which is a very common type of attack practice. Uh, when DDoS is basically a kind of a security attack where attackers actually try to overload your servers with too many requests from multiple locations at once. And DDoS protection offered by Azure, it can analyze the network traffic. It will analyze your network traffic and discard any traffic that looks suspicious. Anything that looks suspicious, it will automatically discard it. So it has that feature built into it. And it can work with variety of services. Like for example, uh, basically DDoS protection services available on VNet. So you have to go to VNet and enable DDoS protection, and it will protect your workload, which might be, let's say, for example, you have deployed it, you have deployed your workload in virtual machines, right? You might have deployed your applications in app services or web app. You might have some kind of load balancers configured here as your load balancer, application gateway. You can even extend this protection to your on-premise or using other, let's say, cloud network via VPN gateway and service fabric, of course. So whatever is deployed inside this virtual network, you will protect it using the DDoS protection. Okay, it is always on traffic monitoring service. That means as soon as you deploy it, as soon as you enable DDoS protection, it will always remain on and it will always keep on monitoring your network. It also has built-in telemetry, monitoring, and alerting. So to just show you an example here, uh, I have logged in into my Azure account, Azure subscription here, and let's search for VNet, virtual networks. Here we are. And if you select any virtual network, right, any existing virtual network, and this is the network details, like you will notice here for this particular network, there are several security capabilities available. Like, for example, I could enable DDoS protection right from here, or I could deploy a firewall, or I could enable Azure Defender for Cloud, which is another smart security service. So if I go ahead and use this DDoS protection, you will notice it's as simple as just enabling it from here. Okay, select enable, and you can just create and use your DDoS protection plan. So this DDoS protection plan, let's just create a new one here. You just have to make sure you create a plan in a same region where your virtual network is. So let's say this is my DDoS Protect 1, apply some tags, and then review and create. This will create a DDoS protection plan, and you can then apply it to your virtual network. Yeah. Of course, there is a costing involved in order to understand or in order to uh, find out how much it is going to cost. You can just go and check pricing calculator as your pricing calculator. Okay, there is also a note available here. You can follow that. Okay, so you can find some more detail about the pricing part and all, right? So these are the monthly charges for protection for 100 IP addresses, for example. Overall charges would be this per month. Okay, and more than 100 IP address, then it would be per resource per month. Okay, so there is a pricing details available here that you can refer to. Okay, I will not create this because I don't have any network as such right now, or my resources are not active anyways. So you can go ahead and enable DDoS protection and it will intercept all the requests, intercept all the traffic, whatever traffic you receive from your customers and your attackers, it will then monitor it and it will automatically eliminate, automatically discard the traffic from the service. Yep. So this is first important service, first interesting service from Azure. Another is Azure Firewall. So DDoS protection is a very basic service which will just monitor the traffic and automatically eliminate the suspicious traffic. Firewall, on the other hand, gives you more control over how you wish to monitor and how you wish to filter that particular traffic. How many of you have worked with firewalls, maybe on cloud, on premise? Yep. No? Fine, no worries. So what firewall will do? It is something like there are some vendor specific third-party vendor firewalls also available, but Azure provide their own firewall that can protect your VNet. This particular Azure firewall is basically a managed service from Microsoft Azure. So Azure as a vendor will be responsible for, you can say, the uptime of this particular firewall and all the performance related metrics. Once you create a firewall, remember firewall has to be deployed in your VNet and it should be deployed in its own subnet. It will not be sharing, it won't share its subnet with other resources in the same virtual network. No. So what the firewall will do? Firewall, once the firewall is deployed, you can create several of filtering rules on your own. Okay, you can define your own rule and then you can make sure all the internet traffic goes through this particular firewall. You can create a separate or you can create a dedicated filtering rules. If you have more than one application, you can create rule for each one of them. Now, what firewall also provides or what kind of feature it does already provide? Microsoft Firewall, Azure Firewall has Microsoft Threat Intelligence feed, okay, that will actually provide Azure Firewall information about some of the malicious IP addresses and domains. So if you are receiving a traffic from some of the malicious IP addresses, it will automatically identify them and it will block them. It could block them. All outbound virtual network traffic IPs are translated to Azure Firewall public IP to make it harder for attacker to target internal network device. But please remember, when you deploy a firewall, it is your responsibility to make sure you never expose any of your internal resources directly to internet. Instead, you expose them via firewall. So you will have a firewall with public IP enabled. So what you just have to do is you have to route all the requests via firewall IP address. So whenever you receive any input, whenever you receive any request from internet, it first goes to firewall public IP. Firewall will filter it. Firewall will monitor the traffic. And if it is all good, if it is not suspicious, if it is a usual unsuspected request, it will then forward the request to its designated target. So you have to create a route. It is somehow similar to how we create network security groups, NSGs, right? But NSG is much simpler service, okay? And firewall is much more complex service than that. Okay. You can also integrate it with other Microsoft services like Microsoft Security Copilot. Copilot is basically an AI assistant that will actually help you with firewall. And there are a lot many other things you can deploy. So Azure Firewall should be used for your typical infrastructure resources when you have infrastructure resources deployed in virtual network. So for example, let's say if you want to enable firewall in a particular virtual network, you need a little bit of planning. What you could do is make sure you have a dedicated subnet for the firewall, right? So let's say this is the virtual network. And what I'll do is I'll create a firewall for, sorry, I will create a subnet for a firewall. So you can see it here. Purpose of the subnet is for Azure Firewall. And the name of the subnet is, it's fixed Azure Firewall subnet. Okay. You need to provide some enough IP address range for that. Okay. Starting IP address for my firewall is going to be this. And the size of the subnet used to be 26. Okay. Earlier, when we see this subnet purpose thing is relatively new. Okay. Earlier, we used to create a subnet on our own with the name and with the size, right? And there people used to always make a mistake. Like somebody tries to create a firewall subnet which is too small, like instead of /26, what if you try to write /27? That will give you around 30 addresses only, which is not sufficient. So here, the size is predefined now, /26, which will release 64 addresses, but that doesn't really mean you will get 64 addresses for firewall. Anyways, so this is IP address range, and this is the starting IP address /26. So subnet IP address range would be this. Okay. And after this, after the subnet is created, I can now go ahead and deploy a firewall inside this VNet. So to do that, what I can do now is, let's go for Azure Firewall. Okay. Yeah, let's just search for firewalls. And under firewall, you can see all the services are now under one single category. So firewall and DDoS protection is now under one single category here. So let's create a firewall. Remember, when I say Azure Firewall, I'm referring to the infrastructure services. For PaaS, we have a different service that we'll talk about in a few minutes. So what I'll do is I'll just deploy it in a resource group. Now, I just have to make sure I'm deploying it in a right resource group. I'm not sure where I deployed that virtual network. Okay. You can have multiple pricing plans like basic, standard, and premium. I will deploy it in a standard pricing plan. And you can have a firewall policy created here. You can use standard or basic policies. You can create a standard policy one. Okay, choose the location and policy tier. This will create a policy. And then you can just choose your virtual network name. Okay. Let's select a virtual network. Test one VNet. Oh, wait a second. Looks like this is in a different resource group, KTS cluster. Fine, no worries. I can still go ahead and change it. So this is in a right virtual network. Sorry, right region. Subnet named. Okay, test VNet requires Azure Firewall management subnet. Okay, fine. There is actually one more subnet required, which is Azure Firewall Management Service. This is required only if you wish to enable tunneling. If you use a basic firewall, let's say, for example, this one. Okay, looks like forced tunneling. Okay, this is still required in basic as well. Right. Let's change back to the standard. And what we can do is we can always just go ahead and create one more subnet in there. Okay. I'll just open one more tab. And in my virtual network, I'll just go ahead and add one more subnet. So this is the subnet we are looking at. This is a virtual network we are looking at, subnet, and we'll just add one more subnet here, which would be firewall management for the forced tunnel. And this will also use 26. But remember, this time you can actually, change the size. You can make it smaller or bigger as well. Let's keep the slash 64. And once this is deployed, this will actually help us to deploy our firewall in this VNet. One more thing I will check. I will check which region this is deployed. Okay, this is deployed in central India. That's right. So it's same. So let me just retry this. Okay, looks like this is not updated. I'll just refresh the page. Yeah. So now here it's a KATS. And this one is my firewall one. Central India, standard, and I will use firewall. You can either use policy, which is a new feature now, or you can use classic firewall rule, classic feature from here. Okay, I will use policy, and we can always create a new policy from here. So let's say I wish to create a policy, standard policy here in the same region. And for virtual network, I'll select this existing virtual network, which has both the subnet, firewall and firewall management subnet. Then we can provide the public IP address for it. Let's not reassign existing IP. Instead, I will assign a new IP address here. This has to be a zone redundant and standard IP address. So just enter the name and press OK, and this should be fine. For management, a network interface card, a separate network interface card will be configured for customer traffic. And you can assign or you can create a new public IP address for this one as well. Yeah. And then let's just continue. Next, review and create. And this is the firewall I'm deploying right now. This is how firewall will be deployed. And then once the firewall is deployed, you can go ahead and add some of the firewall rules. Now, right now here, we are not using classic policy. So what we'll be deploying here is a firewall policy. Okay, so Azure Firewall does provide a dedicated service for security of your infrastructure services. So wait a second. We have started deploying it, but it will take some time for deploying the fire. Yeah, looks like it is in progress. So meanwhile, so we were discussing it like this. Now, what are the scenarios or what are the use cases for us to use firewall? You can see this diagram over here. The firewall is not just protecting our spoke network 1, spoke network 2, but it can also extend the same protection to your on-premise resources as well. Now, one more interesting fact. It could even protect resources that you have deployed in some other cloud, provided you have side-to-side connectivity between the other cloud network and your Azure VNet. Okay, so it could be a cloud network or it could be an on-premise network. It could be other cloud network. Firewall can actually protect all of them at the same time, right? Now, this is a hub and spoke network topology that we are using here. You deploy a firewall in hub network, okay? And then you deploy your resources in spoke network. I guess you are aware of this hub and spoke topology. It is one of the best practices or recommended practice. Let me go and check if it is deployed. No, it will take some time.
But if you have multiple application required, right, multiple resource groups across the globe, so how will we manage like vertical wise those kind of things, right? For
Yeah.
example, all
So
the network components in the hub
right.
network, I agree. But spoke coming to spoke network also, I need to do some modifications, right? So how I all the things you want to keep all the networking things in hub network. That I agree. Base, but
Right,
in
right.
Spoke, no need to do any networking. You're suggesting?
No, no, no. In Spoke, what you have to do is you have to just modify or you have to create routes or routes that we call. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's how the traffic can be diverted or traffic can be routed through this particular network. Now, there is nothing related to Azure firewall here. Routing is very simple thing.
అది
Like
కాదు.
let's say, for example, you understood that, right? Hello?
Yes, yes, I
Yeah.
got it.
Right. Yeah. So these spoke networks are not visible to internet. This on-premise is not visible to internet, but in order to reach any traffic from internet towards these application, there has to be routing you have to configure somewhere. Other than that, there is no special configuration required in spoke network. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, fine. So this particular firewall was for infrastructure. So if you have deployed infrastructure services, for PaaS services, we have a similar feature available. PaaS means if it is, let's say Azure App Services, for example. For PaaS services, we have a specialized kind of a firewall. We call it Web Application Firewall, WAF. Now, what is additional things that we get with WAF, Web Application Firewall? Web application firewall is specifically designed for web application. So it already gives you protection against some of the commonly known or well-known vulnerabilities. Okay, like for example, it already has DDoS protection enabled inside it. WAF already has DDoS protection, right? It can also eliminate some common, you can say, vulnerabilities, right? So let's say it could be uh, yeah, it is basically more for the web traffic, HTTP, HTTPS protocol. Okay. You can also integrate it with services where when you deploy web application firewall, you usually deploy it along with application gateways, for example, or Azure front door, for example. So like, for example, okay, my firewall is deployed now. So I can just show you some of the options available for firewall. So here is my firewall. Right now I'm using firewall policy 1. And I have a management IP address. I have a public IP and I also have private IP address for it. SKU is standard. Okay, so you will notice one more thing. This is the policy now, policy 1. Other than that, we have a DNet rule, we have a network rule, and we have application rule. For threat intelligence, the default threat intelligence mode right now is alert. You can see it also has support for TLS inspection. Okay, TLS inspection, wait a second, what policy I'm using? Policy, I have created standard policy, I believe. Yeah, this is the standard policy. Not supported with standard policy. TLS and IDPS is currently not available with standard. It is available only with the premium one. And actually, this label here was misleading for me because when I saw this, says not supported with basic policy. That's not true, actually. It is not supported with standard policy as well. Fine. Okay. So these are the things. And we also have this auto learn IP addresses, which is basically disabled on the firewall. But what I can do is I can always go back here and just enable it back. Okay, let's remove that. Yeah, I don't have any route server here. This is firewall manager, Azure firewall manager. You should use this to create additional policies. So if you wish to create a new policy, you can use the firewall manager. Okay, so these services are already here. Add security to virtual network. You can wait a second. Let's go to firewall manager. And here it is actually giving me some kind of a quick information to me. Like right now it is currently, okay, 75% of 3 VNets, right? And only 1% here. So here it is complaining to me that out of 4 VNet you have, only one of your VNet is currently protected by firewall and other 3 VNets are not connected. So it's complete a simple theory. Virtual network DDoS security coverage. DDoS protection plan not enabled. It is also complaining to me that out of 4 VNet that I have not enabled DDoS protection on any one of them. And for applications gateway, this is application gateway, and this is Azure front door. Now, this is not applicable for me because I don't have any application gateway or Azure front doors. Okay. This is for virtual hub, which we'll use in case of several interconnected network. Okay. So we have firewall. For policies, I can list all the policies from here. One policy I have already created. This is the policy I created. And this was the policy I created for this particular firewall. And these are the rules under the policy. You can see this is the rule collection. Right now, I do not have any rules created here. You can have network rules. You can also have application rules and so on. Rule is where you define how you want a particular traffic or how do you wish traffic to be filtered for you. So that you define inside the rules. Okay. So you can define all of them inside this particular policy. Now, what all things you can add inside this policy, it depends on what is the pricing plan selected for the policy. You can also have a hierarchy in the policy. That means policy can be inherited from another policy. You can just specify another policy here as its parent policy. So what happens if you have parent policies with rules? When you go to the child policy rule, you will get a additional column here which will specify whether this particular policy is inherited from the parent. Notice this column here. So your parent policy can have several rules predefined, and then child policy can define just a couple of additional rules. You can have DNS enabled for it. And this is threat intelligence. Now, this is interesting one. Okay. So you can enable threat intelligence or you can configure it right there in a policy. Now, these are the options available. Right now, the threat intelligence mode for me is alert only. So I will receive alert every time I will receive alert for every malicious traffic. Okay. Or you can switch it off if you don't want to receive any alert, right? Or you can also use alert and deny. What is benefit of using alert and deny, or how it is different than alert only? In alert only, you will receive alert, but the traffic will not be disrupted. But with alert and deny, the traffic will be blocked, right? And you also will receive an alert. So you can use these policies here. Now, if you want certain IP addresses to be whitelisted, or if you want to allow certain IP addresses, or if you want to, let's say, just create a rule saying that these IP addresses, I don't want them to be scanned for suspicious behavior, you can add them here, IP address range. You can also add domains, right? Okay, this will be your allowed list. You can say this is more like your white list. You can also keep it disabled, but I don't think disabling threat intelligence is good. You can also go for TLS inspection, but I believe this is a standard policy and we don't have an option to enable it. IDPS is also not available for standard policy, but if it is a premium policy, you can go ahead and set the same things here, alert, alert, and deny, right? You can define a signature rules here, and you can also provide private IP address, bypass list, etc., etc. Yeah. Now, about the web application firewalls. If I just go back here and let's go to firewalls, we also have an option web application firewall. So what is web application firewall? Web application firewall, web application firewalls actually are dedicated for standard web applications. So if you are deploying something like application gateway, for example, application gateway, here it is. And you can deploy an application gateway with web application firewall bundled with it. Okay, so let's say, for example, if I need to deploy an application gateway, I can give application gateway a unique name. a resource group, and other details like this. And you can also deploy it in a particular virtual network. Okay, please remember, you need to have a dedicated subnet for even application gateway. Then you can deploy front ends. Okay, you can just choose an IP address, an existing IP address or a new IP address. Okay, now please remember, uh, you should have enough IP address pool, or there is a possibility that yeah, okay, it actually accepted. With my subscription, I cannot deploy more than 5 public IPs in a single region. So I thought it might not allow me to do that, but it's allowing me to do one valid backend pool. You need to provide a backend pool. And then you also have an option to deploy. In configuration, you have an option to deploy. Wait a second. How about I create a pool without any addresses inside it, just for the testing purpose, okay? Yeah. Now, here you can see you can define the routing rule and everything here. Okay, fine. This is how you define everything. And let me just go back here. In the pricing tier, I forgot to select this. WAF V2. This is a pricing tier for application gateway. Now, this will actually deploy application gateway with web application firewall pre-configured or pre-enabled for me. Okay, so this is a different type of a firewall, web application firewall. Now, this particular application firewall will protect your applications deployed on-premise, on other cloud, or on-premise on your Azure cloud applications. Now, whichever kind of firewall you use, a typical way to actually map all these services across a region is via VNet peering or VNet connection. So what you can do is, this is called network segmentation. You have multiple virtual networks, or you have multiple networks in multiple Azure region. How do you make sure they are related or they are linked with each other, for example, or there has to be a proper communication setup between them. Now you can see here all these networks are interconnected. You can use VNet peering, for example, if it is in same subscription. So here are two networks in same region, and here is another network which is in another network, right? So why you should use network segmentation? It gives you an ability to group related asset. You can isolate the resource, and you can have governance policies set by your organization for those resources, right? So this is how you set it up. In case if your network is in different subscription, or if your network is in different cloud, you can use site-to-site connectivity instead of peering. Yeah. Any questions about firewall, web application firewall? Anyone? Fine. I guess I should have shifted NSG to the
Any possible
first.
to any UTM feature is available? UTM, you are blocking.
UTM.
Ah,
No, I'm not aware of whether these services are available here.
if one of the spoke location don't want to access that social media, how can you achieve this if you enable firewall?
Wait a second. Let me check if this feature is available. You can use filtering.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why
You
I'm
can do
asking. But
this.
you
Yeah, yeah.
you
You
are
can do
filtering.
this. Right, right. You can do this in the premium pricing plan of Azure Firewall. Okay. Under premium firewall, you have an option for web filtering. And in the web filtering, they give you you can allow or deny users access to a certain categories, social media, gambling, etc.
Okay.
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 So this is already available here.
Hmm.
So here it is. This is part of premium version here. Okay.
Okay.
Other than TLS and IDPS, they do provide URL filtering and web categories as well. Here is the web category,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. Got it.
So fine. Okay. Now, sorry, NSG is a very simple feature, and we mostly use this a lot many times. NSG is a default feature, and you just simply create a rule. Okay, what type of traffic should be allowed and what type of traffic should be blocked. It's a very basic feature, and you can assign NSG, or you can say apply NSGs either at a particular resource like network interface or on virtual network subnet. So two locations you can assign it, either on subnet level or on network interface level. So what happens when you define an NSG? You just create, NSG is not a firewall rather. NSG is simply a list of inward and outward access rule. Okay, inbound rule and outbound rule. Inbound rule is where you just allow or deny inward traffic, and in outbound rule, you just enable and disable or allow and deny outward traffic like that. Okay. You can also create a common NSG on particular subnet, right, with some common rule. And then on the individual virtual machines or network interface card, you can specify additional rule. Okay. Like for example, what happens if you create a common subnet wide or subnet level NSG, which will simply block RDP and SSH protocol. That means any virtual machine deployed on that subnet by default will inherit that feature, and by default will not have SSH or RDP enabled. Later, you can configure rest of the protocols on the network interface card level. Yeah. There are always default inbound and outbound rule created by default. Okay, but you can override them by creating a new rule with a higher priority numbers. Yeah. Okay, I will not show you a demo of network security group. I guess most of you already have worked with NSGs, right? Okay, next interesting service is Azure Bastion. Now, before we talk about Azure Bastion, how many of you have used a term called jump box? It's a unofficial term, basically. You might actually have a different name for it. It is like you have deployed several resources in a particular cloud network, right? And in order to manage them, in order to access them, you have deployed one virtual machine there, right? Through which you can access and manage other resources. And you simply, you know, access that particular virtual machine from outside. Let's say, for example, you have deployed a Kubernetes cluster in one VNet, and inside that particular VNet, along with that Kubernetes cluster, you have created a small Linux machine. And every time you need to manage your Kubernetes cluster, you just SSH into that machine. And from there, you access all the resources. That is a standard practice many people even use now. What was benefit of that? That particular machine has complete access to rest of the resources there, right? Instead of exposing all the services from outside, you just expose one single machine from there. Now, even this solution is not perfect. How about in order to access the other resources within virtual network, right? What if we use a managed service instead of creating our own jump box? A managed service which will provide a secure access to those resources. Now, what was the issue with Jumpbox? Issue with Jumpbox was like that. It's a simple machine. And what happens if the credentials for that particular Jumpbox are leaked and some unauthorized person get access to a Jumpbox? Because mostly jump boxes, what people normally do is allow RDP or SSH connectivity from the outside world, and anybody with credentials can just go log in and then access all the resources. How Bastion service is different. Azure Bastion service is a managed service, and you cannot just access it with general credentials like public IP address, username, and password. What you need is access to Azure portal. So if you have deployed anything on Azure portal, right? If you have deployed anything in Azure, only way to access those machines is via Azure Bastion. Don't expose those services, of course, from public internet. Keep them disabled. Only allow them access via Azure Bastion. Now, with Azure Bastion, it's a managed service. you can connect to any of these servers using their private IPs. So communication between Bastion and these servers is via public IP, private IP. Of course, you will also have an NSG here, which should allow it. And users will connect to Azure portal. From Azure portal, they will use feature, okay, connect using Azure Bastion, and then they will choose the target machine and connect. Also, there is one more benefit here. Do you know that RDP protocol may or may not be enabled all the time, or there might be a network where RDP is disabled, right? So here, what Azure Bastion can do, Azure Bastion actually allows you to RDP into your target servers or SSH into target servers directly from Azure portal. There is no public IP assignment required. There is no RDP client required at all. Okay. So now if you go to any Azure, wait a second. Yeah. Now, if you go to any Azure virtual machine, to connect a virtual machine, you will now get these type of options. Wait a second. Like, for example, I have two virtual machines. One is Windows and one is Linux. So if it is a Windows virtual machine, there is one way to connect this virtual machine. Wait a second. You can see the option here. You can connect this virtual machine using Azure Bastion. But in order to access Azure Bastion, you should have access to Azure portal, first of all. So you provide all this, sorry, here Bastion is not created. So you have to create a Bastion first and then connect. So Bastion will simply allow me to connect this machine using RDP protocol right there inside a browser, in the browser. Yeah, this is in-browser connection. SSH connection also will be facilitated through this. What is the requirement here? You just need to have Azure Bastion deployed on the VNet. Okay, now when I click on this button, what it is actually doing is it's modifying my virtual network. It's adding a subnet in my virtual network, a dedicated subnet for Azure Bastion, and then it will deploy a Bastion. Deploying actual Bastion deployment might take longer time. Okay, it might take from 5 to 8 minutes. Okay, 4 to 8 minutes or even longer. Yeah, it's deploying. So what I'll do is I'll just show you the virtual network now. This particular virtual machine is currently deployed in a virtual network. It is currently deployed in the subnet of virtual network K8S sandbox VM VNet. You can see it here. This is the virtual network. And let's see how many subnets are there. Okay, so you can see a new subnet created just here now. Azure Bastion subnet. This subnet was created just now. And inside the subnet, Bastion will be deployed. Yeah. Okay, looks like these two are in two different regions and two different virtual networks. Okay, no worries. I'll also do one thing just to show you an example. I can just go and enable or start this virtual machine for you. Click on start. Yes. So this machine is now about to start. Anyway, let's go back. So Bastion does provide these type of services or this type of secured access. Please remember, unlike a typical RDP or SSH access, Bastion is available only to those people who have access to Azure portal, right? So maybe you have to allow that person, maybe invite that person to your Entra ID, okay, and give some basic reader permissions to them. And you can also have Azure RBAC policy to allow Bastion access to individual users. Okay. Fine. I guess Bastion deployment is still going on. Anyway, I will show you what is this role you assign here. We'll do one thing. I'll just go to Entra ID and I will show you what kind of role assignment you can do here. Oh, looks like I have created so many different users and I'm not using them all the time. As your role assignment for the user. Let's say I have a user called Mr. Admin and I can assign that Mr. Admin certain roles and permissions on my Azure subscription. Looks like this person here has a contributor access. Now, one very quick question for all of you. Do you think uh, contributors will have access to virtual machines via Bastion? Of course. Contributors will also get contributors have access to Bastion. Contributors can even deploy new Bastions. You can see it here. So permissions given here, right? Contributors have access to get the Bastion host, update the Bastion host. They can even delete it, right? Get the session, disconnect, connect, everything. So if you are a contributor user, you already have permissions for Azure Bastion. Okay. Let me go back and check if it is deployed now. Yeah, it's still going on. Fine, no worries. Okay, next important topic here, or the next important feature is Key Vault. What is Key Vault basically? Key Vault is a service that simply is used for securely storing your secrets. Secrets means it could be passwords, it could be access tokens, it could be API keys, right? It could be digital certificates if you wish to upload in there. All that you can deploy on Azure and you can manage it from Azure. It will basically keep all the secrets safe. It will keep all your secured secrets at one single location. And Azure Key Vault has its own APIs that can allow access to these secrets to you or to your applications. Like, for example, I'll give you a simple use case. You have a DevOps workflow. You have a DevOps workflow, maybe an Azure pipeline that will deploy an application at a target server, right? And this particular application, when it is deployed on the target server, it needs some essential credentials. Maybe, for example, you can store some API access tokens in Azure Key Vault and allow this particular application or your pipeline to read something from Key Vault. Yes, you can also link it with Azure Pipeline. Azure Pipeline is a feature under Azure DevOps, CI/CD feature. So pipeline will get all the essential secret access keys, passwords, etc. from Key Vault, and then use them in their workflows. Okay, so you can define RBAC policy, like what user and what applications are allowed to access your Key Vault and what data from Key Vault they can access. Okay. To show you an example here again, now this is our last module now. Let's go and try Key Vault. Here it is. Here we have Key Vault. I don't have any Key Vault right now. If I create a new Key Vault, you will notice here we can deploy this. Let's deploy it in this resource group. You can provide Key Vault a unique name. Why unique name? Because it later becomes part of its access endpoint. Pricing tier, you can have standard one or premium one. Premium one has hardware backend keys. Okay, that's the only difference. And then you can also provide how many days you wish to retain your Key Vault. And here for access configuration, now there are two options. Either you can use Azure role-based access control or Vault access policy, which is an old one, old style basically. In Vault access policy, you can define like what users are allowed to access, what kind of resources. Okay. You can also specify which virtual network should be allowed to access your Key Vault and then finish. Let's say if I click on the finish button now, it will start deploying my Key Vault. Bastion deployment is still going on. It will take a little bit more. And I have started deploying Key Vault as well. Inside Key Vault, you get options like creating and managing secrets, creating and managing access keys, right? Or digital certificates, etc. Yeah. Other than this, now Azure also has support for some AI-enabled features, right? We have uh, We have Defender for cloud network, for example, Microsoft Defender for cloud. This will disable or this will stop my keyword creation. Okay, so some of the additional features now available on Azure, which are AI enabled. So they will provide you, or they will actually help you to set up a secure network on cloud and enable security across cloud or extend it even to on-premise as well. Any questions, queries so far? Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. No, I said any questions or queries you have about this?
Nothing in the chat.
Yeah, I can see it. Right. Fine then. So these are the some of the services available on Azure, including DDoS protection, Azure Firewall, Web Application Firewall, and Keyboard. These are some of the services available here. Okay. So these services, when used together, or when we use all these services together, it will allow us to set up a secure environment for deploying our workload. That's it in this session. Now, if you want more information about this, this entire module is available on Microsoft Learn. Okay, if you go to Microsoft Learn, all these modules are already available there for self-learning purpose. Okay. Yeah. So that's it for the short session here. Any questions, queries, anyone?
No.